Thanks very much. It's great to be here. Evening, everyone. So I'm the CEO of the Energy Council of South Africa. We're quite a new organization, and we are trying to take pride in the fact that we're making kind of big moves in the market. But really, the idea was to set up a business representative organization focused on the net zero pathway, which is the energy transition. So we represent business, but importantly, both public and private sector business. So Eskom, CEF Group, and the IDC are founding members. And we focus on the energy sector, so principally the power sector, which is obviously electricity, and the fuel sector, which is liquid fuels, natural gas, and green hydrogen. The target is net zero. Everyone signed up for that, and any member who joins the Energy Council signs up to that. However, we know that the pathway is going to be complex, a lot of technology, expensive, challenging. So while we might miss some milestones along the way, the target is clear. We've got to get to net zero. We've signed global commitments. We have pending climate legislation in South Africa, and business has certainly signed up to that kind of pathway. But we need that coordination, we need that focus, and I think that South Africa, we are behind our global peers. And so we need to really focus on implementation, and we need to catch up. But I think it's a very exciting space, and we can chat about the opportunities going forward. Thanks.
Fantastic. Thanks.
Thank you, Matt, and good evening, everyone. So I'm Kadri Nassib. I'm the Executive Director for Energy here in the city of Cape Town. And just now while it was raining, I was thinking, isn't it great we put out this typical British summer's day for you guys? But you know, on a serious note, you know, Cape Town is a very exciting place to be right now, and I think a lot of it has to do with the political leadership within the city, and I think the direction that we've been given as the administration in this wonderful city. And so certainly when the mayor, Jordan Hill-Lewis, came in, and he made it very much a central part of his campaign, was this notion of breaking the back of load shedding, and to do that with the express intent of helping to regrow and rebuild the economy in the Western Cape. But I think it goes further than that. I think it also talks to the rest of the country, and hopefully what we do down here becomes a blueprint, you know, for the rest of the country to follow as well. And so it's been a very exciting time for us because we've been able to take that kind of political goodwill and leadership and be able to convert that into activities that ordinarily would have taken us perhaps a decade to get off the ground, looking at the red tape and bureaucracy that sits within local governments. But we've been able to turn things around to the point where within the next 2 years, we should have broken the back of load shedding, and that's purely based on the market's response to the type of engagements that we've had with them. So we're very excited by that. I'd like to share a little bit more with you this evening about some of the progress that we've made on that. But certainly within the next 2 years, we know that we will have done our part to end load shedding in South Africa.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I'm sure everyone that lives here will be very grateful for that. So touching on that, the city's just launched its 2050 energy strategy. Can you tell us a little bit about that and what the shifts and stresses were that informed that, as well as some of the enablers you hope will come to the fore to create that vision?
Sure. So when we talk about an energy strategy, and certainly one that looks at an end state of, let's say, 2050, you know, the natural thinking is more to have your eyes glazed and think, okay, well, we will decarbonize by 2050. Most of us will be retired or not here, so, you know, it doesn't really matter if we do achieve the target or not. But at the end of the day, there's a short-term imperative, which I've mentioned to you, in load shedding. So we've tried to craft a strategy that builds on the short-term needs, the short-term priorities, and couple that to the longer-term trajectory of actually taking us to a space in which we can fully decarbonize the economy. Now, when we talk about some of the shifts and some of the stresses that we're experiencing, I mean, a lot of them are common, whether you're in the UK or whether you're sitting here in South Africa, for example. So you would look at the role that digitalization would play. You spoke earlier about AI, but I mean also we have to look at data analytics and how that gets incorporated into business models, particularly within a public sector space, which is not always, I would say, prevalent in terms of skill sets within a country like ours. Decentralization also plays a key role, particularly as we devolve into a space where a monolithic, vertically integrated utility makes space for several businesses that are supposed to stand on their own 2 legs. But coupled to that, of course, would be the rise of prosumerism as we look more and more at the contribution that's being made by the private sector. You then have to look at the advent of disruptive technologies, and of course, the UK has been a very ardent supporter of R&D, and we're very supportive of that as well. And I think if we look at the role that technology like hydrogen, EVs, and everything will play in our economies, we know that we're in the advent of something big in terms of paradigm shifts. And then lastly, of course, is the decarbonization issue, which is central to our minds. Not our immediate priority, but certainly is a goal that we are trying to adhere to. Some of the other issues that we confront with, as I said, is the rise of prosumerism and opening up the market to allow consumers to wield power, and then also to create a space for SSEG, which has also been done within our market right now. To that, you could add a whole lot of other factors. I mean, harnessing new types of energy or being able to actually participate in a slightly deregulated space, because that's ultimately where we're sitting right now. But coupled to that would also be declining energy sales, which also plays a role in determining what it is that we actually would be doing to prevent that further slide in terms of revenue. If we look at enablers very briefly, for us, certainly we would like to create this future-fit energy utility. So to move away from your typical distribution business, as it is right now, and create an energy business that actually works together with its partners in the private sector. So that's probably, in a nutshell, I would say, some of the key drivers that have pushed us down that road on that strategy.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Yeah, as you say, there needs to be activity now, and there are tremendous opportunities. So, James, considering the Energy Council, and you have a pivotal role in engaging industry around energy, what are your latest perspectives on energy security, and what initiatives are you most excited about to alleviate the stresses we're currently under there?
Yeah, thank you, Matt. So I think it's important just to frame, we have to think about energy security and energy sustainability. But importantly, energy security, I think a little bit uniquely to South Africa, we have this fixation on load shedding, rightly so. Once load shedding is actually sort of eliminated for the general person on the street, we still have a lot of work to do to recover overall system reliability and reserve margin. We then also still have a lot of work to do to ensure a future reliable energy system that will service very changing consumer demand patterns. And I think, Kaji, you've absolutely hit the nail on the head. Highly digital, shifting patterns, and how will we reliably service that? Now, the other leg of the energy discussion then is sustainability, which is environmental sustainability. We know what that is. Then there is economic and commercial sustainability, which also talks to affordability and equitable participation, which I don't think we're doing terribly well at the moment. We need to do a lot of work on that. And then lastly, it's the socio-economic sustainability, which is a really big retreading of skills innovation, which I think that a program like this is just so important in creating jobs, creating meaningful skills for a future system which is really highly digitized. So when we kind of put that into perspective, I think a lot of the energy debate actually is polarized by this focus on emissions and climate change, where actually it's a technology disruption. And that's what I really like about this program. So if we focus on what do we really need to do, it's a technology disruption. How do we implement? We know we're behind the curve. We've got this energy security problem that we need to resolve. As the Energy Council, I must say, we're also very proud we have partnered with the UK, along with some of our members, industry and UK FCDO have sponsored quite a big program which we've called the Energy Transition Roadmap, which is not focused on trying to solve the 2050 outcome. I mean, that's the crystal ball gazing. I agree with you, Kadi. What we've tried to focus on is what do we need to implement now in order to deal with issues now that moves us forward, that addresses these issues of we've got to solve load shedding, we need jobs and skills, we need to stay on the pathway of emissions reduction, and it must be affordable, it's got to be bankable. Okay, so that's what we've tried to focus on, and it's fantastic and I appreciate, and I think Gail, the back there, we work closely with her. It's been fantastic to have the UK support in this program, and I think things will come to market in the very near term. Maybe just as a last point, what I would like to say, Matthew, is that I'm very pleased that Kaji and the City of Cape Town are doing their share to end load shedding. So from top down, I think everyone's aware of the Business for South Africa partnership with government. That has been focused really in 2023, was a big program led by the top 30 listed companies of South Africa, going to the president and saying, we have to address energy, transport, logistics, crime and corruption. How can we do that? And the agreement was, this is a partnership, we're going to work together and we're going to do this. This is not a political thing, this is the government of the day. We've got to solve this in the interest of the country. So that partnership has really grown in strength. The Energy Council leads and coordinates the energy leg. But equally, there's a huge amount of focus and really exciting stuff on transport logistics and crime and corruption. And in the energy space, we essentially work through the vehicle of NECOM, the National Energy Crisis Committee, under the Energy Action Plan. And so we have every 6 to 8 weeks a in-person meeting with the President and ministers. On a 2-weekly cycle, we meet with all the DGs, reporting on what are actions being taken, are they on track, are we being able to solve 3 big questions. 1, are we on track to be able to solve load shedding? 2, are we building enough new generation to move our energy sector forward? And 3, are we reforming for a future sustainable world? And so that's been an amazing journey. I think it's really taken kind of shape incredibly well. It's a very responsive and different government that we're engaging with, especially Eskom. And I think it's making a big difference. And at the moment, we see year on year, probably over the last 3.5 months, the stats as I have it at the moment, just top of my head, we're about 67% down on load shedding hours over the last 3.5 months. So what we're seeing is a stabilization of the power station performance at the EAF level. Businesses kind of put in nearly 3,000 hours of expert, seasoned engineers, power station engineers, out of business who have been sitting at the priority power stations, working with Eskom, trying to solve problems. So I think that is making a difference. We are seeing a stabilization of EAF. The modeling numbers indicate that if that combined with renewable energy connected to the grid this year should be over 4 gigs, next year should be over 6 gigs. So we are seeing a really rapid shift in the energy space in South Africa, very positively. I don't think grid is going to be a huge sort of challenge. There is enough available, and the system is moving incredibly quickly at the moment, and very excitingly so. But importantly, we've got to think about moving away from the energy scarcity security conversation and starting to move into the innovation, opportunity, integrated system thinking space. And that's where I think this is a fantastic opportunity.
Thank you, James. Yeah, we couldn't agree more. And I think it's a great segue into Kadri touching on that around the opportunities and how that's changed the ecosystem. You guys as a city are closer to customers and to consumers. And so how have you seen the adoption of new technologies like embedded generation, solar power, battery change the way that the city interacts with customers? And how do you see that evolving over the coming decade?
Well, certainly there's been a rapid evolution in terms of uptake of solar plus batteries. And James, you were talking about what's coming onto the grid, and when that's more centralized in many respects. But if you look at what's happening on the private side with about 4,000 megawatts that's been added in recent times, I mean, that's a complete 6-pack power station that's effectively been added by the private sector. And to some small degree, we see that in Cape Town, where it's over 130 megawatts of power that's been added, to households, and then there'll be some surplus that gets fed back into our grid. So we recognize that, and we're trying to build on that. So what we've done in the past year is to allow for prosumerism to really take shape. And so we've actively engaged the market, starting with the commercial customers, and we now allow those commercial customers to sell us more power than what they actually consume from the grid. And as of a few weeks ago, we're now going to be allowing the residential customers to do exactly the same. Yes, there will be a process attached to how they get credited with the surplus that they've generated, but that mechanism is now being put in place. So that's a useful precursor, I think, to a more open, flexible, competitive marketplace, because from there, we'd be looking at the way in which we integrate electric vehicle charging so that we could have a mechanism by which we buy back that power during peak periods and then actively allow through tariffing for those vehicles to be charged again at off-peak periods. So ultimately, we're looking at a system that allows us to be able to allow for more generation, but also to manage demand better. And in line with our demand response, we're looking at a program called Power Heroes. And the Power Heroes campaign is designed to bring on board residential customers, but also industrial customers. We won't talk about the industrial customers today, but there is a load curtailment program that runs with those customers. For residential customers, we're targeting the high loads that are non-essential during load shedding. So, for example, your air conditioning, swimming pool pumps, and then, of course, your geyser, your hot water loads, for example. So we've gone to market and we've appointed a contractor that will now go effectively door to door and then sign up residential customers to participate in a voluntary program. And if they do sign up, they'll have a smart meter installed on the property that will then allow the aggregator, as we'll call it, the aggregator then to be able to accumulate enough load to be able to allow us to offset up to one stage of load shedding, which for Cape Town is about 60 megawatts during winter and about 40 to 45 megawatts in summer. So having access to that mechanism is a very useful way of mitigating beyond what we're doing now, which is 1 to 2 stages less than what the country is on. And that can be done in a relatively short period of time, but it relies exclusively on the cooperation of the our partners out there. And that's got to be one of the key enablers of our strategy, is the interaction with business and customers out there to ensure that they play their parts as well.
Fantastic. Well, it's great to see that those technologies are already coming to the fore and helping to ease short-term concerns. James, maybe zooming out a bit, looking at your perspective and Energy Council's perspective on the landscape, you have got great exposure to that. How would you contrast our market with other international markets you've had exposure to, and where do you see the place for international collaboration?
Well, Matt, so I had the privilege, I attended Enlit Europe end of last year, and it was interesting. They said there were 4 key challenges to the European electricity sector. So one, grid. They got 3,000 gigawatts of power queuing for grid. 2 was regulatory alignment and efficiency. 3 was workforce and skills, and 4 was supply chain. So I thought to myself, well, that's not too far different from South Africa. So, however, our maturity levels are so much lower. And when, what really struck me from that kind of week at Enlit was that every problem was just an opportunity. And they were just like running around. There were like 3-4 floors of exhibitions of just digital everything. And like every problem had like 10 digital solutions competing to solve it. So I think again, this concept of we've got to start moving out of energy scarcity. I think that we are going to largely, as a country, solve load shedding to the layperson on the street in 2025. That's not the same as we've got our energy system recovered and everything is working perfectly. But largely, I think economically, we're very resilient at an intermittent stage 1 type of level of load shedding. We then really need to start thinking about integrated system performance as an energy system, and it's got to be just digital. If I'll just look at some of the stats, I mean, our recent assessment had been around 3% of households can actually afford rooftop solar and batteries. So we're not getting social participation. We're seeing, I think outside the city of Cape Town, and there are, I think, some municipalities in the Western Cape which are doing incredibly well, moving that direction, but still not at the level that the city of Cape Town is. But we're not getting broad municipal participation in this transition. So these are sort of aspects that we really need to move now into integrated system delivery, rather than trying to kind of solve load shedding. And this is going to be a sort of very important shift in the overall thinking in the energy narrative. At the end of the day, we need all technologies, but I do think that often what's missed is a little bit is that wind and solar in South Africa is just an amazing resource. We're looking at wind on average 41% capacity factor, solar like nearly 30, 29. These are orders of magnitude above Europe and UK and many parts in the world. A recent study actually put South Africa at 7 out of 10 lowest cost producers on green hydrogen, just purely because of our resources, positioning, and capability. So these are opportunities which you really got to start thinking about. We can't do that when we kind of buried in sort of trying to solve load shedding. So we do need to kind of move, and we need to start having much more integrated sort of approaches and a lot more digital thinking. Thanks.
Brilliant. Well, glad to hear it. That's why we're here. So, quick final question for both of you, maybe quick fire. If you could design a future energy system for South Africa, what would be one vital element that you'd want to lay the groundwork for now?
Right. Maybe just before I answer that, just to pick up on something that you've said earlier, James, talking about economic sustainability and how we would most likely end load shedding without talking about the longer term sustainability of the network, etc. The question is, ending load shedding at what price? Because that has become one of the key things for us, and affordability is one of the key pillars of our strategy going forward. And the question is, how do we develop a system that is affordable to the masses, particularly the bottom of the pyramid, because for everybody else that can afford solar, it's a short-term inconvenience at the best of times. For the rest, it's simply unaffordable. It is inaccessible. So this is one of the key things that we have to keep in mind when we design the energy system of the future. The other thing is, and to be slightly controversial and say, do we need as much regulation in this country as we do? We found that we've been more successful as a city when we've pushed against the system. We found we got a response. We had to go to court, we had to threaten all the time until we get a reaction. And I don't think we need that. We've seen how reactive the private sector can be if given the opportunity. We need more of that. And this for me is one of the keys to lay a blueprint down with as little regulation as possible. And the last thing I want to mention is the need for us, and links to the deregulation issue, is private transmission. Being able to compete with Eskom in a space where Eskom doesn't really want to go that extra yard and compensate for additional transmission needs, particularly for the Western Cape. At some point, we'll be exporting surplus power, and that capacity just does not exist on our grids. We need private sector involvement in that space. That must be opened up. The last thing I want to say is that it's about time that we understand and acknowledge what customers want and need, not what we think they want and need. And in order to get us there, we can stop thinking about smart meters and start thinking about maybe smart energy management systems that allow us to integrate their needs into our planning and allow us to create a value-added service that actually suits both the utility of the future and the customer's needs.
Thank you. James?
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I'm trying to think of what silver bullet I'd like. So I think to talk about the silver bullet, I would first say my viewpoint is I think we are solving load shedding. I don't think grid is as big a constraint as what it's sometimes put out there by the media. I think the rate of investment in renewables is unstoppable, and you're not going to put that back in the box. And it's actually starting to run at levels that are above what we actually can sustain or need. There's a question, the biggest risk there is, will it stall? That's a problem. We can't allow that to stall. But if the ERA amendment bill goes through, we see a new national transmission company with a private sector board. I mean, I've spoken to the chair a couple of times. Priscilla, she says, we've got this huge vision, skills, innovation. We want to be like a new kind of global leading transmission company. So when you put that in the perspective, you say, okay, well, I think that with a little bit of hard work and a leap of faith, those things are sorted. So what's left? Where would we need a silver bullet? And I think this is in the municipal space, Kadri. I mean, I do think that even the metros are just battling. The City of Cape Town has done exceptionally well. And to your point, has kind of ground out some of those wins and successes to your credit. But this, we've got like 167 local municipalities that don't have a blueprint, don't have a solution. And this is going to talk to the whole issue of socioeconomic inclusion, involvement. So we have to find a blueprint for that. So if we could find a silver bullet, Matt, I'll leave it with you, but maybe you can come up with one. I would say we need a municipal model.
Perfect. Well, we'll try our best. I can't give you any guarantees. Thank you so much, gentlemen. I hope you're all as encouraged as I am by the conversation. It seems like we're at a really interesting point where there's a confluence of lots of investment in the energy system, lots of challenges to be solved, but also a great need for the implementation of new technologies and a great space and great actors doing the most to put the roads in place to put them on the ground. So thank you so much for joining us.